Hello there. I want to tell you a one story. Maybe this story will teach you something. Effective immediately. That's what the HR director said this morning, right there in the boardroom, with the whole team pretending not to look at me. My name is David Harper. I'm 52 years old, and for the last 20 years, I've been running projects at Northway Steel, one of the biggest contractors in the Midwest. Bridges, highways, rail lines, you name it. I've had my fingerprints on it. And now, just like that, I was out. I didn't argue, didn't beg, just said, good luck launching that new line next week without me. Silence. People I'd hired fresh out of college, people I'd mentored into leadership roles, they just stared at the table. None of them dared to look me in the eye. I walked back to my office, the same corner office I'd earned through 2 decades of 80-hour weeks, and pulled out 2 cardboard boxes. Photos of ribbon-cutting ceremonies, plaques from state governors, and that chipped coffee mug my daughter gave me when she was 8 years old. World's best dad. As I started packing, the door cracked open. It was Amanda, the new VP. 34, shiny MBA from Columbia, brought in 6 months ago to modernize operations. Never set foot on a construction site in her life. She lingered in the doorway. David, about the Midwest Rail account. I didn't even look up. Not my problem anymore. Her mouth opened like she wanted to say more, but she didn't. She walked away. One by one, my team came by. A handshake here, a quick hug there. Mark, my lead engineer, stayed the longest. He whispered, "This is wrong." I told him, "It's just business." But we both knew it wasn't. Because what Amanda didn't know, what Marcus, the new CEO, didn't know, was that they'd just made the biggest mistake of their lives. And by Friday morning, when the Midwest Rail executives walked into that conference room, asking for me by name, they'd find out exactly what it meant to fire the man who held the whole deal together. I started at Northway Steel straight out of college. Back then, it wasn't some Fortune 500 powerhouse. It was a struggling contractor, barely landing county bridge jobs. The founder, old man Northway himself, gave me a shot when I had nothing but a degree and a willingness to work. I spent my first years in the mud, boots on the ground, learning everything I could. How to read soil tests, how to deal with unions, how to keep inspectors happy. By the time I was 30, I was leading projects. By 35, I was the guy they called when deadlines were impossible and budgets were already blown. When the recession hit in 2008, half our competitors folded. But we survived because the state officials, the city planners, the railroad commissioners, they trusted me. My wife Linda, she knew what the job cost. Missed anniversaries, late-night calls from overseas suppliers, those 5 a.m. drives to job sites in the snow. She raised our son Matthew while I chased contracts that kept 200 families employed. I always told myself it was worth it, that I was building something solid, roads that people drove on, bridges that held, rail lines that carried freight across the heartland. But things started shifting when Mr. Northway retired 2 years ago. His son Marcus took over as CEO, and Marcus didn't grow up on job sites. He grew up in boardrooms. He brought in consultants, people who spoke in buzzwords, not blueprints. Amanda was one of them. She sat through client meetings nodding like she understood, then interrupted me mid-sentence to suggest efficiency models. She started reorganizing systems she'd never worked with. Worst of all, she began calling my longtime clients, talking about alignment opportunities. She thought she was building relationships. What she didn't realize was, these weren't relationships you could build over LinkedIn or a quarterly report. These were handshakes after midnight site visits. These were promises kept in rainstorms. These were favors traded over 20 years. And now, she thought she could replace all that with a fancy deck of slides. Thursday night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was worried, but because I wasn't. I sat in the kitchen at 2 a.m., coffee in hand, staring at my old leather notebook. 20 years of details filled those pages. Client quirks, contract addendums, even sketches of site problems we'd solved on the fly. Linda walked in, her robe wrapped tight, eyes half closed. "You're planning something," she said softly. "Just thinking," I told her. She didn't push. 25 years of marriage had taught her when to wait. By 9:30 Friday morning, my phone lit up. Amanda. I let it ring. Then Marcus. Straight to voicemail. At 10:15, my former analyst Beth texted, "They're panicking. Hollowgate's here. They're asking for you." I typed back, "I don't work there anymore." By 10:47, Marcus himself called again. His voice was tight, almost pleading. "Randy, you need to come in. There's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," I said. "Yesterday, Amanda made it pretty clear, effective immediately." He lowered his voice. "Look, name your rate. Just get in here and salvage this." I almost laughed. "Marcus, I can't legally represent Brimale. I'm not an employee, not a consultant. You made that decision." Beth's next text came 5 minutes later. Hollowgate walked out, 20 minutes in. Amanda couldn't answer a single technical question. They're furious. I stirred my coffee slowly, watching people rush past the cafe window outside. My phone buzzed again. Amanda this time. "This is sabotage," she hissed. "No," I said calmly. "This is consequences." By noon, word had already started to spread. In biotech, reputation doesn't leak slowly. It bleeds out all at once. By 1:30, industry boards were buzzing about Hollowgate, walking out of Brimale's biggest pitch of the year. At 3 gallon, while Amanda scrambled to post some spin about exciting restructuring on LinkedIn, my inbox was filling with interview requests. Companies that had once politely circled, waiting for me to leave, now came knocking hard. By Monday morning, I was in the glass-walled offices of Driftshade Limited, sitting across from their VP of Business Development. They'd heard about Hollowgate. Everyone had, and they wanted me. Not just as another manager, but as Senior Director of Client Relations. Salary bump, stock options, full autonomy. I said yes before the coffee on the conference table had cooled. Beth texted me that afternoon, "Marcus just fired Amanda. Effective immediately." I typed back. Took him long enough. Within a week, Hollowgate had signed with Driftshade. The $30 million contract Amanda thought she could wing was now mine again, only under a new logo. And within a month, Beth joined me as Director of Pharmaceutical Consulting. Tom came on board too, handling international development. We weren't running from something broken. We were building something better. Meanwhile, Brimale's stock slid. Clients left. Employees whispered. And Marcus? He looked smaller every time his name came up in the Kansas City Business Journal. One Friday, I sat across from him at Brewster's Coffee House, the same table where I'd once ignored Amanda's frantic calls. Marcus stirred his cup without looking up. "Randy," he said quietly, "I made a mistake. A big one." "Yeah," I told him. "You trusted buzzwords over people." He tried to offer me Amanda's old position, VP of Operations, double the salary. I just shook my head. "It's not about money, Marcus. It's about trust. And you lost it." 6 months later, Brimale's board finally pushed Marcus out. The company that once thrived on loyalty and long-term relationships was now a hollow shell, limping along under new leadership. Their biggest clients had scattered, and their reputation never recovered. Amanda? She landed at a startup in Denver, boasting about organizational transformation. 8 months later, the startup folded. Her profile still circulates on LinkedIn, dressed up with all the same buzzwords, but with no trace of what really happened. Meanwhile, Driftshade kept growing. The pharmaceutical consulting division Beth led was thriving. Tom was closing international deals from Shanghai. And me? I was promoted to Senior Vice President of Strategic Development after just half a year. Our names were showing up in business journals, but more importantly, we were building something real, built on trust, knowledge, and respect. One evening, my daughter Casey called from college. She laughed as she told me her business professor had just used my story as a case study. The Brimale Mistake, they called it. "Dad," she said, "I told the class what you always told me. The best revenge is living well." She was right. You can't save everyone. You can't fix every mistake. But you can choose what you build next. And sometimes the sweetest justice isn't in fighting back. It's in thriving when others thought they had buried you. That night, I closed my laptop, turned off the light, and sat down at the dinner table with Helen. She reached for my hand and smiled. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. Because the truth is simple. Sometimes life throws you out of a place you thought was home, so you can find the place where you really belong. Thank you for listening. I hope you liked my story. Subscribe and like this video if you want to see more video. Goodbye.